the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Alt. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from the exploits of the Incomparable Mulla Nasrudin by Idries Shah. This audio has been made available by the Idries Shah Foundation.
All I needed was time. The mullah bought a donkey. Someone told him that he would have to give it a certain amount of food every day. This he considered to be too much. He would experiment, he decided, to get it used to less food. Each day, therefore, he reduced its rations. Eventually, when the donkey was reduced to almost no food at all, it fell over and died.
"Pity," said the mullah. "If I had had a little more time before it died, I could have got it accustomed to living on nothing at all."
Cut down on your harness intake. Visiting a sick friend, Nasrudin was just in time to see the doctor arrive. The man was in the house for less than a minute, and the speed of his diagnosis stunned the mullah. First the doctor looked at the patient's tongue, then he paused briefly. Then he said, "You have been eating green apples. Stop doing this. You will be well in a couple of days." Forgetting everything else, the mullah pursued the doctor out of the house.
"Tell me, doctor," he panted. "Please, tell me how you do it."
It was quite simple when you have experience to distinguish various situations," said the doctor. "You see, as soon as I knew that the man had a stomachache, I looked for a cause. When I got to the sick room, I saw a heap of green apple cores under the man's bed. The rest was obvious." Nasrudin thanked him for the lesson. The next time he was visiting a friend, it happened that the man's wife answered the door.
"Mullah," she said, "we don't need a philosopher, we need a doctor. My husband has a stomachache." "Don't think that the philosopher cannot be a physician, madam," said Nasrudin, forcing himself into the presence of the patient. The sick man lay groaning on a bed. Nasrudin went straight to it, looked underneath, and called the wife into the room. "Nothing serious," he said. "He will be well in a couple of days, but you must make sure that he cuts down on this habit of eating saddles and bridles."
At court. Nasrudin appeared at court one day with a magnificent turban on his head. He knew that the king would admire it, and that as a consequence he might be able to sell it to him. "How much did you pay for that wonderful turban, mullah?" the king asked.
1,000 gold pieces, Majesty."
A vizier who saw what the mullah was trying to do whispered to the king, "Only a fool would pay that much for a turban." The king said, "Why ever did you pay that amount? I have never heard of a turban at 1,000 gold pieces."
Your Majesty, I paid it because I knew that there was in the whole world only one king who would buy such a thing."
The king ordered Nasrudin to be given 2,000 pieces of gold, and took the turban, pleased by the compliment.
"You may know the value of turbans,"
the mullah told the vizier later,
"but I know the weaknesses of kings."
Theoretical instances. "Where are you going, mullah?"
"I'm riding to town."
"Then you'd better leave your donkey behind, for there are robbers on the road and someone might steal it." Nasrudin thought it was safer to ride his donkey than to leave it in the stable at home, where it might equally be stolen. His friend therefore lent him a sword to defend himself with. On a lonely part of the road he saw a man walking towards him.
"This must be a bandit,"
said Nasrudin to himself.
"I will anticipate him."
The innocent traveller was surprised when, as soon as they were in earshot, the mullah called out,
"Here is a sword. You can have it. Now let me keep my donkey."
The traveller agreed, and took the sword, delighted with his luck. When he returned home, the mullah told his friend,
"You were quite right, you know. Swords are very useful things. Yours saved my donkey for me."
The pace of life. "Why can't we move faster?" Nasrudin's employer asked him one day. "Every time I ask you to do something, you do it piecemeal. There is really no need to go to the market 3 times to buy 3 eggs." Nasrudin promised to reform. His master fell ill. "Call the doctor, Nasrudin." The mullah went out and returned, together with a horde of people.
"Here, master, is the doctor, and I have brought the others as well."
"Who are all the others?"
"Oh, if the doctor should order a poultice, I have brought the poultice-maker, his assistant, and the men who supply the ingredients in case we need many poultices. The coalman is here to see how much coal we might need to heat water to make poultices. Then there is the undertaker, in case you do not survive."
The sample. Sitting one day in the tea-house, Nasrudin was impressed by the rhetoric of a travelling scholar. Questioned by one of the company on some point, the sage drew a book from his pocket and banged it on the table. "This is my evidence, and I wrote it myself." A man who could not only read but write was a rarity, and a man who had written a book. The villagers treated the pedant with profound respect. Some days later, Mulla Nasrudin appeared at the tea-house and asked whether anyone wanted to buy a house. "Tell us something about it, Mullah," the people asked him, "for we did not even know that you had a house of your own."
"Actions speak louder than words,"
shouted Nasrudin. From his pocket he took a brick and hurled it on the table in front of him.
"This is my evidence. Examine it for quality. And I built the house myself."
Other people's mail. Nasrudin could not write very well. His reading ability was even poorer, but he was more literate than the other villagers, and one day he agreed to take down a letter from a yokel to his brother. "Now read it back to me," said the man, "because I want to make sure that I have not left anything out." The mullah peered at the scrawl. Finding that he could not get further than "my dear brother," he said,
"I cannot quite make it out. I am not sure if the next words are no or work, and before or heart."
"But this is terrible. Who is going to read it if you can't?"
"My good man," said Nasrudin, "that is not my problem. My job is to write the letter, not to read it."
"Besides," agreed the villager, completely convinced, "it is not addressed to you, is it?" Why didn't you tell me before? Nasrudin and a disciple were on the road. Whenever they arrived at a large house, they would present themselves, in the manner of travelling dervishes, at the door. Food would be handed to them, and also water. Nasrudin used to eat as much as he could, then lie down to sleep. The disciple ate a little, then shook himself, then ate more. After some days the mullah asked him why he ate in such a strange manner. "Well, master, I find that if I eat a little, then drink some water, then settle it all by shaking, I can hold more." Nasrudin took off his sandal and gave the youth a couple of blows.
"How dare you conceal such a valuable secret from me? Oh, to think of the amount of food I have wasted by not being able to eat it! I knew that the limit of eating must be farther ahead than I could attain. The limit of filling is, after all, bursting.
Supply and demand. His Imperial Majesty the Shah arrived unexpectedly at the tea-house where Nasrudin had been left in charge. The Emperor called for an omelette. "We shall now continue with the hunt," he told the mullah, "so tell me what I owe you."
For you and your 5 companions, sire, the omelettes will be 1,000 gold pieces.
The Emperor raised his eyebrows. "Eggs must be very costly here. Are they as scarce as that?"
It is not the eggs which are scarce here, Majesty. It is the visits of kings.
The value of the past. Nasrudin was sent by a king to investigate the lore of various kinds of Eastern mystical teachers. They all recounted to him tales of the miracles and the sayings of the founders and great teachers, all long dead, of their schools. When he returned home, he submitted his report, which contained the single word, carrots. He was called upon to explain himself. Nasrudin told the king,
"The best part is buried. Few know, except the farmer, by the green that there is orange underground. If you don't work for it, it will deteriorate. There are a great many donkeys associated with it."
Aplomb. Nasrudin and a friend went to an eating-house and decided, for the sake of economy, to share a plate of aubergines. They argued violently as to whether they should be stuffed or fried. Tired and hungry, Nasrudin yielded, and the order was given for stuffed aubergines. His companion suddenly collapsed as they were waiting, and seemed in a bad way. Nasrudin jumped up. "Are you going for a doctor?" asked someone at the next table.
"No, you fool," shouted Nasrudin. "I'm going to see whether it is too late to change the order."
Kinds of day. A man stopped Nasrudin and asked him what day of the week it was.
"Couldn't tell you," said the mullah. "I am a stranger in these parts. I don't know what days of the week they have here."
Alone in the desert. Nasrudin was wandering along a desert track when he met 3 fierce Arabs. They had been arguing. "There are 3 possibilities as to how minarets could have come about," they said. "We have just heard of them and are wondering which is the correct one." Nasrudin was not sure.
"Tell me your theories, and I will judge," he said.
"They fell from heaven," said the first.
"They were built in a well and then hoisted up,"
said the second. "They grew like cacti," said the third. Each man drew a knife to reinforce his version.
Nasrudin said, "You are all wrong. They were built by giants of olden times, who had a longer reach than ours."
Maiden in distress. Nasrudin was strolling one summer evening past a walled garden, and decided to look over at what delights might be within. He climbed the wall, and saw a beautiful maiden in the embrace of a hideous monster, a deformed apparition, as it seemed to him. Without a second's pause, the chivalrous Nasrudin leapt into the garden, and put the beast to flight with a series of blows and curses. As he turned back to receive the lady's thanks, she struck him in the eye. 2 enormous servants seized the mullah and threw him back into the street, and then belaboured him. As he lay there, half insensible, he heard the woman crying hysterically for her lover, whom Nasrudin had frightened away.
"There is no accounting for tastes," said Nasrudin.
After that he cultivated a limp and wore an eye patch, but no maiden called him into her garden during his walks. Unfair. Nasrudin walked into the city of Konya for the first time. He was at once struck by the number of patisseries. His appetite sharpened. He went into one of these shops and started to devour a pie. Certain that he would get nothing out of this ragged apparition, the owner rushed at him and cuffed him.
"What kind of a town is this?" asked the mullah. "A place where they hit a man as soon as he has started eating."
What has gone before? In a dark alleyway, an agile pickpocket tried to snatch Nasruddin's purse. The mullah was too quick for him, and there was a violent struggle. Eventually, Nasruddin got his man down on the ground. At this moment, a charitable woman passing called out, "You bully! Let that little man get up and give him a chance."
"Madam," panted Nasruddin, "you ignore the trouble which I have had getting him down."
All you need.
"I'll have you hanged,"
said a cruel and ignorant king who had heard of Nasruddin's powers,
"if you don't prove that you are a mystic."
"I see strange things," said Nasruddin at once. "A golden bird in the sky, demons under the earth."
"How can you see through solid objects? How can you see far into the sky?"
"Fear is all you need."
Why are we waiting? 3,000 distinguished epicures had been invited to a feast at the Caliph's palace in Baghdad. Nasruddin, by some mistake, was among them. This was an annual event, and each year the main dish excelled that of the previous feast, because the caliphal reputation for magnificence had to be sustained and excelled. But Nasruddin had come only for the food. After a long wait, preparatory ceremonies, singing and dancing, an enormous number of huge silver dishes were carried in. On each one, placed between 5 guests, was a whole roasted peacock, decorated with artificial but edible wings and beak, its plumage shining with sugary precious gems. There was a gasp of delight from the gourmets at Nasruddin's table as they feasted their eyes on this supreme work of creative art. Nobody seemed to be making any move towards the food. The mullah was starving. Suddenly he jumped up and bellowed,
"Oh, all right. I admit it does look strange, but it is probably food. Let us eat it before it eats us."
The flood. "The king has been kind to me," a man was telling Nasruddin. "I planted wheat and the rains came. He heard of my troubles and compensated me for the damage done by the flood." The mullah thought for a moment.
"Tell me," he asked, "how does one cause a flood?"
This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.